New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani meeting with J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon and Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon. That happened yesterday, and this follows a backlash against wealth tax proposals and a perceived anti-business sentiment after the mayor filmed that video outside of Citadel's CEO Ken Griffin's home. Joining us right now is Partnership for New York City President and CEO Steve Fulop. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Can you give us a little bit of a readout from what took place at these meetings?
So I think it's kind of a tour of getting to know the business people. So we're kind of 4 or 5 months in. I think that the Ken Griffin thing actually hit a chord where, for the first time, the mayor feels some real concern around the relationship with the business community. So he's kind of been proactive starting at the end of April with these sort of meetings.
Were these organized by you? Were they organized by him? Were they organized by the banks themselves? What happened?
The first meeting was at the end of April with myself and the chair of the partnership, Rob Spire, CEO of Tishman Spire. And then subsequent, we heard from our members that they were reaching out the following week to Jamie Dimon, David Solomon. The one from Bank of America predated the Ken Griffin thing. It just became more of a sense of urgency, I suppose, to get it on the books because of the narrative there.
Has the mayor suggested to you, putting aside the policy on the tax, which we can talk about, that the video itself, which seems to be so central to all of this, was a mistake? Has he said that or no? Or does he believe in the video?
When we met with him 2 days after the video, we urged him to apologize or acknowledge that it was a mistake. He was reluctant to do that, largely because of the narrative that it would have created. But I think if you were in kind of a closed meeting with him, he would recognize that he would have done it differently. I mean, he's pretty clear about that. But, we're here, and I don't think, 3 weeks after the fact, you're going to get any sort of public apology. So we are where we are.
How much of these conversations about effectively what the video represents underneath the video, or about the actual policy as it relates to taxing the wealthy, taxing the pied-à-terre tax, and the sort of mechanics of that?
So the meetings at this point are more performative. That's probably the biggest concern, right? So it's good that he's doing outreach. It's good we're having these conversations, and that needs to continue. The real question is, what's the next step from a policy standpoint? There's no give or reason for him to kind of move at this point from his posture that the tax policy that he's proposed is good, which is part of the problem for the business community. But there's a bigger narrative here that's problematic. I mean, there's a regulatory policy framework here that's more difficult than anywhere else. There's a sentiment and tenor that vilifies businesses. So I think it's just more complicated than that. This tone right now is just get to know you. We are thankful that you're here, and we want to build a relationship.
On the pied-à-terre tax itself, where do you stand? And has the business partnership come out with any kind of proposals on your own that say, look, the way you can actually balance this budget is by doing X, Y, Z, and that maybe that doesn't include this pied-à-terre tax or something else?
So let's talk about the pied-à-terre tax. I mean, we certainly understand the politics of tax the rich and the Russian oligarchs and the Saudi princes, but what we've tried to highlight is that you have a lot of companies that have a presence here in New York, CEOs are elsewhere, like Citadel, like Disney, like Moelis, members of the partnership. The CEO spends a lot of time here, has a presence here, have grown companies here, but they are subject to this tax. And what we've said is that really the person that you want to penalize? Or a good example would be even if you have a house elsewhere in New York, let's say you live in Westchester, Suffolk County, and you have an apartment in New York City, you're subject to that tax. And we would say, should you be penalized on that? So it was kind of a hasty decision that they had a problem implementing. They did it because of the rhetoric around tax the rich, which is good politics. But at the core of it, the implementation is a real problem, and it sets a tone that is really combative towards the business community.
But what is the solve? I mean, I think ultimately you have to say to yourself, there's a problem. There's an actual problem, which is the math doesn't math.
Yeah, is the problem that New Yorkers aren't taxed enough, or is the problem that there's too much spending?
No, you don't have a revenue problem here because you've grown faster than inflation. At the core of the problem is you have some entitlement programs that exist in New York that don't exist anywhere else. Like, talk about the rental assistance program. FEPS. I mean, the mayor would be here. He would tell you that we're not expanding it. But at the core of the problem is, should that program exist at the city level? Of course, it's a vital service. It used to exist at the state level. It's a multi-billion-dollar program, but that drives the budget. In the private sector, when you start a program, you reassess it at some point down the road. Government and politicians never do that. So that's really the problem. So you layer one program on top of the other, and then you kind of get into this situation that we are today. So, I mean, how do you fix it? You really have to have an honest conversation with no sacred cows. You got to talk about housing in a way that is not beholden to any special interests, whether it be labor unions or advocates on set-asides on affordable housing or school reform, same
part
thing.
Of the problem, it seems like, and I've always wondered whether a city has any leverage in these contexts, is there are services that this city has tried to provide on its own that effectively, as you mentioned, I think where you're going with this is, that should effectively be paid for by the state. You also, by the way, have the MTA. I mean, you have a whole bunch of things going on as it relates to transport and other things that historically you would think should be paid for by the state. But the state doesn't want to pay for it. And if you're living in Albany, you're like, or Syracuse or Ithaca, you're like, I don't want to pay for these people.
Right.
And so what kind of leverage does the city have or not have over the state? It's historically been, if the mayor can be super popular and the governor can be less popular, that's been the leverage.
Right. So I would argue that New York City has a unique opportunity, ironically, with Mayor Mamdani in the sense that he wasn't elected with any special interests. Most of them were not with him. So he could effectively be a change agent by saying that we're not beholden to any of those things and some of these programs aren't necessary. There's 49 other states. The overwhelming majority of them do not have the infrastructure and the programs that exist here in New York City layer on top of them. And they don't have the same cost of government. So if you're fair about it, you would ask yourself why. And I think the business community in these meetings, while the mayor is looking for some sort of introduction to have a conversation, the business community's tone is you need to get your costs under control and we need to have a real conversation because people are venturing into other parts of the country because they're more welcome there.